Hello.
How are you?
I'm doing pretty good. I just finished my linear algebra final yesterday.
Oh, wow, that's good.
The caffeine gave me insomnia, but I'm glad it's over.
Yeah.
I did while I had insomnia. I was looking into her research. Do you know the Qualia Research Institute?
I think I've heard of it.
I was looking into their research lineage and their executive director and director of research, and it's really interesting. I took some notes.
Oh, yeah?
There's a couple. They're definitely high up on my reading list now. And there's actually a couple of things that I thought might be interesting for you guys.
Yeah.
I could just share more. I could just share the highlights of my notes later.
Yeah, well, once Jesse is coming in a couple minutes here.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, that sounds good.
Besides that, I apparently there's like a Qualia computing group. I'm not sure it's a reading group, but it's like a meetup every Friday night. I'm probably gonna go to that.
Oh, yeah?
I think Qualia computing is probably like, the more I read about it, the more I'm like, this sounds a lot like my intuitive research interests. I think a lot. I can say more in detail later, but I didn't get a ton of time to actually flesh out like my particular agenda, but I did have some time last night to like look into this. Like this week, I should have more time to half of like Google Doc I was talking about making, which I feel I'm interested in because now that I'm at least successfully passed linear algebra, like 99% sure I am. I should have more time to deep dive, and I'm really motivated to do so.
Yeah.
I think that when it comes to like math, at least high level math, like math always came easy for me in terms of like the concepts, but I have slow processing speed when it comes to computational details, which basically just means arithmetic.
Yeah.
So sometimes I pick up notation kind of slow, so linear algebra is a pain. I had to retake it.
Right, yeah. Well, I think a lot of people have that problem with the technical details are harder than like the concepts a lot of times because there's a lot of like notation is sometimes very arbitrary. They'll pick notations that are convenient to the field, but it's like doesn't make any sense necessarily.
Yeah, I like the professor who I had last time, in that she had a very like broad conceptual sweet version of it, but she was a lot more proof heavy, and that was hard. She actually seems pretty down for me. Like I asked her about some of my recent interests because she does not genealogy. That's not the right word, but she does like phylogeny.
Yeah, phylogenies.
She's like a math PhD who does research about phylogeny, and she this isn't exactly what I'm interested. It's kind of removed, but she generally is like interested in what I was interested in, which is interesting. In the future, he's someone who I want to like ask mathy stuff about.
Yeah.
Like I have this, like I very much doubt that like getting a grasp of like the ins and outs of algebraic typology before grad school is like realistic. You're probably focusing on like getting Calc 2 and 3 out of the way and like but it's really interesting. There's like I could probably grab a few more relevant pieces and broad concepts and maybe one or two details from it for my research.
Yeah.
Even if like I doubt I can like just grab all the advanced maths, especially because some of it's slow for me.
Yeah. There's Jesse.
Hello, Jesse. I was talking about the research I did last night and my experience with my linear algebra professor. I actually have some things I'd like to share that I thought were interesting from the research.
Yeah, I saw you doing stuff. But,
yeah, I sent like a wall of text last night. Yeah. I wasn't aware of this before. Can I start?
Yeah, go ahead.
Apparently there's a major divide between a functionalist approach and a formalist approach. So like a functionist believes that, I wonder if in body cognition, like, or I'm not sure about standard body cognition, but Anson Lim might actually be a functionalist. A lot of functionalism is computational. It boils down to breaking things down to computation. Apparently it's associated with explaining consciousness away, but fundamentally it's about the systems that you're a part of rather than your internal structure being the most salient explanatory element, whereas formalism believes that there's an innate internal structure to your phenomenological experience. Well, at least in this context, but phenomenological experiences. And it's interesting because I've seen the whole book. Anthony Camara's Radical Embodied Cognition book, the whole book seems to be like an argument against a particular kind of formalism and for functionalism. See, the other side is interesting. The Qualia Research Institute is a fairly new, I'm not sure what they are, but I didn't actually find that, but they're a research institute, but their executive director is Michael Edward Johnson. He wrote an article. Well, it's like a I think it was 70-page online book that I found called Principia Qualia, and he describes it as a falsifiable theory of how science of phenomenology could be constructed. He's interested in unifying structural, dynamical, and computational models of self-organizing systems. The director of research there is Andre Gomez Emerson. He is interested in similar fields, but his interests are more eclectic. Like, he brings algorithm design, psychedelics, neurotech theory, but he also seems to contribute to computational properties, using the computational properties of neuroscience. The research lineage is really fascinating. I definitely pilfered it for a reading list for the next 2 months. The website listed 3 major research lineages for them, being formalism, self-organizing systems, and phenomenology. In terms of formalism, they mentioned a David Marr, which had a really interesting. He co-authored this with a guy named Poggio, and it was 2 G's. I'm not trying to pronounce that, but probably Marr Poggio. So it's called the Marr Poggio 3-level machine information processing theory. And he talks about how there's 3 levels at which machines can process. You can approach machines processing information. There's a computational theory level, where you delineate the goal, why that goal is appropriate, and the logic of your strategy to execute it. And then the second level would be representation algorithms. In particular, there's a strong focus on input and outputs, and algorithms for transformations, generally the how of implementation. And then you have particular hardware implementation, how to combine representation algorithms to be realized physically. Apparently this is from the 80s, it's a little bit old, but I thought that was really relevant for a lot of research. He mentioned a lot of different authors who generally are really fascinating, like this guy named Leo Tonomi, apparently is actually the founder of integrated information theory and as a full stack paradigm about the empirical theory of consciousness. Emmy Noether, I think that's the woman. She crafted a theoretical basis for formalizing invariance in physical systems, which forms what he calls a research aesthetic for a compelling research aesthetic, where I remember that particularly like one thing that he said about the research aesthetic being you determine the invariance of the system, you explore what is present or absent in whether mathematical symmetry is present or absent. And this line is I really love because I feel like it's something I naturally do. Find what people are already doing implicitly and describe it explicitly. I think that after that, she started talking. I don't know exactly what invariants are or mathematical symmetry, but I like the words and I like the possible connotations. I probably would definitely look into Pannoni and Noether later on this summer, at least a little bit. Then he talked about self-organization lineage. I've seen a lot of Friston just mentioned everywhere. Like he seems to be very like hype these days. Adaptive systems resist natural tendency to disorder. The main takeaway that I want to, I've actually printed out the free energy arc principle paper and found like a little how to actually read Carl Friston blog, so I'm gonna dig into that eventually. He mentioned a Solen Axtoy whose main research seems to be eigenvalues of the brain, which is fascinating because at least the writer of this lineage description was saying that you could compare that these could be plausible phenomenological resonant modes of the brain. I'm not entirely sure what that means, but I like the connotations. And then the last self-organization lineage person to mention was Robin Carhart Harris. And he had a few interesting ideas. The main ones were about, this reminded me a lot of like the net logo stuff, which makes me wonder if it's actually involved with that. He wrote about entropy, dynamic. Okay, I can't remember handwriting, but I remember that it was about how there's a certain threshold of between order and chaos where I guess entropy dynamic systems, which I guess are adaptive systems, end up having undergoing rapid change in what Harris calls an avalanche of changes. He also mentions entropic disintegration, where large energy overwhelm existing attractors, shifting the equilibria. I remember, like, I can't remember my handwriting. I remember the main takeaway that I found interesting about Harris is that he seemed to be modeling that division point where systems seem to be most able to shift rapidly, and it's particularly, it offers a few different tools for entropic systems to bridge mechanical and qualitative properties. He's also someone I'm interested in because he seemed like his tools would be relevant for my particular research interests. And then the phenomenology is interesting, but at the same time, they didn't mention this one, a ton of what traditionally associated with phenomenology. Like they justified it as what they mentioned, and maybe near the end, maybe they still want to flesh it out more. But they mentioned that these are just useful concrete ontologies in mind. What that have that's called natural kinds of subjective experience. The one phenomenologist they mentioned would be David Pearce. And the main takeaway that I had about him was that argument that the texture of experience is as important as intentionality, and intentionality is oftentimes proposed as a core feature of experience and phenomenology. And then after that, they just had a couple of paragraphs about Buddhism, how they naturally have ideas that seem isomorphic with contemporary research developments. In particular, the self as a leaky. I like this line a lot. The self is a leaky reification of self-reinforcing algorithmic processes. And this is another place where they mentioned resonant modes of the mind. Apparently, what they call is that naturally Buddhism frames a lot of things in a very phenomenological, experimental manner, such as dhammas, as the idea of dhammas being the innate constructs where as composed to other things that people conceptually mentally grasp but not real. I think that, and I found that even though I have enough experience with Buddhism where it was one of my main interests, and I took a Buddhism class and attended meditation retreats. I went to a temple, so I understand the background of Buddhism fairly well. So I find it interesting that the Qualia Research Institute and the different what we're reading through in the embodied cognition reading group that I mentioned. We're currently reading through it's a book by Qualia and
The Embodied Mind.
Yeah, the embodied. In that group, they're talking about how mindfulness bridges the mind-body problem, serves as the answer to the mind-body problem, and as a continuation and fulfillment of a lot of phenomenological aims that phenomenologists did not entirely address due to the analytic nature, due to analytic philosophy's nature as encouraging detached mental observation as the end-all be-all. So I didn't entirely connect that with what they were arguing here, despite this also being about Buddhism and phenomenology. But I did find it interesting that Buddhism is popping up at two different locations. I listened to the beginning of a podcast by interviewing, I think it was Andres Gomez Emerson, the research director, and I ended up making like a little list of things I want to research in the first 30 minutes because there's a lot that was a little beyond me. But the main takeaway I got was that they're looking that at least he sees Qualia as part of a dual monist reality where you have the physical world and then you have Qualia as this like shadow, other side of the coin coexisting with it. Actually, a big feature of what his worldview seems to be that Qualia is. Here's a realist view on Qualia, in that he believes that Qualia is a deep structural real thing, in the same way that like he compares to electromagnetism and how in the past electromagnetism was seen as unnecessary by Occam's razor, but he argues for the value of Qualia via a argument of predictive power. And there was some back and forth there. The other guy played devil's advocate and challenged that, saying that there might be utility, but that doesn't necessarily argue for that solution address, like Occam's razor and the amount of metaphysical assumptions there. I think I don't remember exactly how he addressed that, but I remember him mentioning that the comparison to electromagnetism and that he turned the table around and said functionalism has issues too. I wrote down the enclosure problem, which isn't actually what they called it, but there was a kind of and functionalism has an issue where they have a hard time. If what functionalism is describing computationally exists, they have a hard time delineating the boundaries. It might actually be the boundary problem, as the name. The boundaries of what is consciousness and what they are describing if there is no innate structure there, or what. So they might have computations that are isomorphic to brain processes of consciousness that we find obviously salient, but there's a hard problem of what is related to consciousness and what isn't, without using some level of innate definition of some formal phenomenological innate forms. And he argues that functionalism, like imagine 500 years from now, they don't really have a clear goal in mind of what it would be like to fully explain consciousness. I'm not entirely sure. I'm sure there's definitely some easy ways to push back against that. But overall, what I found most interesting about the research is the idea of formalist innate forms being the key driving force behind the research, in that's an approach that inherently is very copacetic with me, and something that I naturally have intuitively embraced the world as being in Qualia as being comprised of. And I generally really appreciate their focus on unified theories of consciousness and looking for like Michael Edward Johnson talked about it was Emerson talked about how Qualia research and formalism has the possibility to elegantly carve. I think it was reality as joints, but I might be mixing that up with using metaphysics. But the idea that you might be able to throw together 10 terabytes of computation to process what will be a conscious process. But if you understand the underlying structure, you can do that in a fraction of the computational power. And for me, I definitely, the next step for me definitely would be to I want to deep dive a little bit into the executive director's book, Principia Qualia, and Friston, along with a couple of the other authors, and continues with the podcast. I think my approach seems to be, my intuitive approach seems to be a hybrid of formalism and ecological embodied cognition, which is really strange because they seem to be opposed philosophically. But I guess if I had to describe my intuitive approach, I was actually talking to Jesse, and I don't know if this is realistic, but I actually want to hash out some sort of simulation of this, maybe on NetLogo or something, where I think intuitively for me, especially like the last couple of years, it's been very clear to me that people internalize and mirror the structure of the ecology around us in our subjective processing. And I think that is I think what bridges the gap between the ecological embodied approach and this formalist, phenomenological, abstract, innate forms approach is that, types approach is that I think that ecology has natural structuring, both in terms of micro and macro scales, in terms of kinds of input outputs and stances of allostatic regulation. Like this sounds it's kind of weird to bring up tarot, but tarot has, and I don't want to sound rude, but I think that there's a long history of a lot of different mythologies and fanciful or psychoanalytic traditions have an idea of like, I know in tarot there's like cups, something another, and one has to do with consumption, one has to do with operations of the mind, and I always easily thought, okay, you could easily connect that formally with the idea that like emotions are interior allostatic relationships with other interior allostatic content. Logic are conceptions of external allostatic content with other external allostatic content. Consumption would be the relationship of fixed.
So is this part of what you wanted to model, or you were saying you wanted to get to some kind of what did you want to have at the end?
I think you can create. I think I'm interested in like they mention input outputs quite a lot, and they mention different kinds. Like they both the Qualia Research Institute and Camara seem fascinated by seem to really heavily utilize dynamical system modeling. And Qualia Research Institute also mentions a few other modeling tools, including the integrated information theory and Dother's interest in mathematical symmetries. So I think combining that with ecological structures and a natural kind of I haven't seen the author that closely aligns with this, but I'm sure there might be some. I'd be interested in combining that with a sort of like, I believe that the kinds of input outputs creates independent axes of that resemble causality that resemble the innate kinds that the Qualia Research Institute is looking for. And I'd be interested in modeling that. I think there are easier and harder ways to model that. I think if I wanted to be like very ambitious, I would try to implement a actual like, I think a language-based model. I think a language-based empathy machine would be the hardest form, not possible based off like at least my current theoretical understanding, and I think I've evolved like the best use of my particular strengths. But I think like an easier version would be there is this article headline about I think an easier strength would be to create like a virtual environment, and then within that simulate some sort of interactions in that substrate, rather than actually having like a flexible adaptive system that can actually interact with our words. So those would be two directions I would like to go in the latter half of the summer, and I definitely still feel like there's so much to learn and read in relation to this. And I'm excited because this summer I'm we'll have access to 3 reading groups that are really related. There's a Qualia computing group, in a body cognition group and an emergence groups, I feel like I want to fully utilize.
Did you get to go to the? Because I mean, I appreciate you taking us on a one tour of all this stuff. I've known to do that myself. Did you? I saw much after it happened. Did you go to the?
Unfortunately, no, because that was right after. That was like right after my finals. I think it was during my final, like right after my finals. So like I was definitely not in a point where like I was like in pain from the stress and caffeine. I need to chill. But like next week, I asked Alex Chen, and it is every week, and there's like he added a guy to the group who knows more about like details and times. So I'm definitely gonna attend next time.
Yeah, I realized I'm actually Facebook friends with Andres Gomez Emerson, and I think we met through, the Alex Kitchen web.
Maybe I can like Facebook friend him and you as a mutual friend, like making this stuff.
Well, yeah, and I think, I've heard about the Qualia Research Institute before, and I'm not really sure, there's a lot of, hype and cool soundiness with Qualia. Like, Qualia is kind of I would consider it like a bit of a buzzword at this point. But I'm very curious to see what will go with that, and I totally,
Yeah.
I think flesh out some projects.
Low key, I'm stressed out about grad school still, and like how I'm going to transition my research interest to grad school, but that's a problem for a little later. Not like a lot later, because I'm entering my senior year, like a little later. I can find relevant professors, I can find relevant fields, I can try to offer, I can try to get some authorships and continue my research experience. So I'm not really stressed out about that, but I'm definitely like, okay, so this is my research interest. How the fuck am I going to do this for a job? I mean, there's obvious, like, there's a few different paths. This is obviously like hard sci, computational neuroscience, CS is a focus on intelligent systems.
So, I'd be happy to talk about that more, but I want to, I don't know how much.
Yeah, this is lab time. Yeah.
You wondered like what you had to do.
Oh,
Yeah.
Well,
I took up half the time already.
That's good. I think that's good that you had some time to kind of go through that and discuss. I have a couple of comments. Well, first of all, could you type up those notes like in a
Like a Google
some
Doc?
sort of Google Doc? Yeah, because I think we'll probably go back to those over time.
Yeah.
And then
I'm keeping them in like a little binder.
yeah, but I mean, like have another copy like in Google Docs so we can.
Yeah.
I found that working on paper is good, and then also having a copy on Google Docs just so that you have a backup or you can share with people. And then we'll probably revisit a lot of that stuff later. And then something you mentioned kind of at the end was where you'd like to go with this. So you mentioned you mentioned virtual environments, you mentioned NetLogo. So yeah, maybe we'll try to work towards that goal of getting it to that point. I mean, it's not something you just throw into like for something like that, you have to be, for something like NetLogo or a virtual environment, you have to take the ideas and sort of boil them down to something that can be computationalized, I guess is the best way to put it.
Yeah.
And so I think that's the biggest challenge here. Because there's a lot of good ideas. And definitely, I think there's a lot of stuff that, like, I don't think I mean, I don't know the literature, but I don't think people have really done before. Especially, in terms of, like, well, the Friston, the free energy principle, I guess he's applying it to everything these days, but, really kind of taking, a couple different perspectives and kind of integrating them into a single sort of perspective or simulation would be really good. That would be great, yeah.
I think I'm definitely like integrating concepts that are already meta-oriented. Like the Qualia research they talk about how they're unifying structural, dynamical, and computational models of self-organized systems.
Right.
So I think what my strength that I'm bringing would be is I seem to come from a slightly different tradition in terms of the angle I'm coming at. A lot of my inspiration seems to originate from like my friend who has more experience with mythology than me, like who reads a shit ton of like Joseph Campbell, says that a lot of my original like motivational structures seem to be Taoist and Jungian. Even though I haven't read either, but like I've read like the Offsprings. So I think like that's whereas a lot of this seems to be phenomenology combined with Buddhism. So I think there is a kind of innate forms what that structurally could be in a relatable but systematic computational model that I haven't seen addressed yet, even though they're getting really close in terms of like what topics they're talking about. And I'd be interested in, and I think one of my strengths is that I really impractically ask big integrated questions, just like to my own detriment. So I think I am somewhat bridging the gap between ecological embodied cognition and a more formalist approach to phenomenology, which inherently seem incompatible but have really interesting intersections and possibilities to create something interesting together. I'm sure that, like, especially with their experience within the field, like Michael Edward Johnson and Andres Gomez Emerson have to be aware of embodied cognition and probably knowledgeable about it. I never saw them mention anything. I think they seem pretty philosophically opposed to a lot of positions within it. So I'm not sure they're like two competing camps.
Yeah. So, well, I mean, competing camps usually have like they have that kind of debate structure. Well, it's like with Neuromatch, they have the debates, which are kind of like, they're not like formal argumentation debates. They're kind of like, I believe this, or this is my position, They might overlap somewhat, but they might not.
At this point, I'm mostly interested in picking up, I guess I would call it like paradigmic and computational tools, and then also picking up a lot of particular crafting particular specific theoretical commitments. Like I already have some formalisms in mind that can compute in terms of how they can be made computational. And if I don't have them in mind, I know where I can get them.
Right.
Like the missing piece between how I would make this computational would be distinctions of causal emergence among scales as an ecological, as creating an inherent ecological layering.
Right.
But I know that I've seen Eric Hole's research, which specifically about that, and I have like a grab bag of math I think is relevant, and intuitively for me, I can. Let me say this. I wrote down last night, and I don't this. I don't think this is practical because I looked into the math, and this would probably take me 2 years of learning math. But if simpler math doesn't cut it out, I think some kind of mix of algebraic typologies, properties of boundaries, graph category theory, and vector calculus gradients, modeling. The concept of the emergence of scales. I'm sure there has to be some mathematical models out there in papers. I'm in an emergence group that I haven't attended for the last few weeks because my life's been a hot mess. But now that my new algebra is off the table, I definitely want to attend. And I would definitely not directly bring it up, maybe, but like they were diving around like the themes there, so I could slowly bring up like what authors have those sort of models in place, and what sort of modeling approaches and mathematical approaches they're taking about it. So I can fill in the gaps.
I think Johan's would be very good resource for that, to give you some ideas about the math, because he's looked at that a lot.
I really, low-key, I wish I was an applied math major now, or just like, I wish I had Calc 2 and 3 under my belt. I wish I probably had like a couple of grad level math courses under my belt right now, but I think I can fill in the gaps as needed, and I probably like in my spare time work on like work on researching and building up my foundation in math.
I would.
We can't help you know the winner, but yeah.
I would start sort of simply. I would try to like boil it down to like maybe the simplest thing you can do to implement, and then maybe kind of like work from there. So you might implement it very simply, and then like try to maybe after you get that working, then try a more complicated structure. Maybe some more advanced math as the opportunity presents itself.
After I build like a simple computational model, and then do at least some preliminary research into other authors' math and computation models for the mechanics I'm interested in, I'm going to ask my professor, who specializes in phylogeny but also has a lot of experience in linear typology, algebraic typology, and like she seems very knowledgeable in algebraic typology and the other topics I mentioned, and for like direction, is this realistic? Can I use the math this way? And like, are there particular things I can learn, or like bare bones I can use as a tool? Because I think she's a good resource that I definitely want to tap into. I did well in her class, but I was also a hot mess in her class. But I think she liked me, so I think she'd be down for like a call.
I think people are always willing to reach out. I think if you have an idea.
Yeah, I was gonna like email her today to get correspondence. I think I could. My aim is that like I don't think I need like it all fully prepped by the time I call. I just like get the linear data to correspond. I think it's better to keep the correspondence, but I'm definitely like I'm deep diving into this. Like I'm a little obsessed with my research right now. Maybe unhealthily so. I'm really interested in while I have the time this summer, fully utilizing my time to pursue my personal research interests, because in fall I have a thesis level course in. So like my data science major is co-ran by the stats and the CS department, and so there's like a senior level CS course I'm taking where you have two options. You can either do your own self-directed research project, or you can do a project for a local company. And I feel like I want to go into that with a research project in mind that seems mature and intelligent, articulate, and related to what the courses I've taken, so that I don't waste my time making a database manager for a local company. I mean, it's not a waste of time, but it's not the best use of my time. So in order to like really leverage it, and also in order to like properly identify the direction I want to go for grad school and have something under my belt for grad school, I really want to hammer this out and utilize like the intersections of what I've spent a lot of time thinking about already, and just into something that's deliverable, useful, and I think this can do cool things. If not groundbreaking, I think it could do very interesting things that have a lot of potential. So I'd be interested in really like throwing myself at this.
Yeah. Well, yeah, that sounds good, and we should we'll definitely follow up in coming weeks, and let's like kind of talk about it on Slack too, because I think it's maybe needs more updates than just every week in terms of what you're thinking, and so that's good.
Do you understand the Yankee principle? Just curious.
I don't think anyone does. But I mean, I think I can follow it along. So I think we'll if we run into problems, we can probably consult with people outside the group. I don't know how many people actually really understand it though, because I see a lot of people publish on it, and it's it's like I don't know how many people actually understand it. That's not uncommon, by the way, for a lot of like.
Yeah, it's come up here before. I did a presentation on it. I mean, it's something that you could definitely present on or read a paper and do a small presentation on. So,
my linear algebra is really fresh, so I could, and I know it's like I could actually probably learn the math, because a lot of like this whole chapter of Markov changes I learned about. I think I've reviewed it, looked up Markov blankets and Bayesian. I feel like there's something where if I know the math, it might make more sense. Isn't that like? It seems like I get the general gist of it in terms of like, okay, you have a system. It's subjectively. It has like a what was it called? Catalytic self generation of manipulating its environment in so much to minimize surprise based off the organizational structure it desires, which seems to be the general gist, but I'm interested in particular mathematics because I feel like that's what we want to see from our current goals. Some stuff about phases and states.
Yeah. Be a lot of that. You can even make your own Slack channel for a lot of that discussion.
Free energy principle.
Yeah, I think we should. Yeah. I mean, we can make a Slack channel for that.
I think could I make two, one for like formalisms and one for the free energy principle?
Sure.
I think, and then body cognition one.
Yeah, I've actually made some for that already. So, but Bradley, I wanted to let you have the last 15 minutes as much as possible.
Okay. Yeah. So we'll move on. Did you, Jesse? Did you have anything to mention or say? Like, I wanted to give you a chance to.
Not particularly. I've obviously been talking to Anson about some the stuff, but I don't have any major updates on what I've been saying. I mean, there's a lot of overlap between these things, but I think I'm still going to be looking at CGS, and I know we're actually supposed to be talking about that today or something like that. And I'm curious about looking more at CGS itself. But I think I will also be looking. I think one of my personal projects is evolving into kind of a. There's quite a bit of overlap between what Anson said, but it's actually my own idea from. I might have sort of mentioned this in the proposal period of Google Summer of Code, but I think I'm going to be doing slowly creating a paper that's a kind of like a survey paper or review paper of different ways of modeling, like the computational, I don't know, methodology and the platform, the language, and how people are doing it for specific parts of cognition, and I'm not quite sure how to structure that yet. But I'll just say that's been on my mind as a deliverable that I want to work towards, because I kind of mentioned that there's less than there's like I don't know 30 or so days now until NeuroMatch, and so kind of like I haven't heard back from them yet either, so maybe I won't be in the involved track. like if we're all involved in it, then obviously NeuroMesh is going to kind of take the center stage for a little bit.
Yeah.
And it's like I'm trying to find, okay, what's the place I need to get at before NeuroMesh starts? Because then I also will be doing stuff with the other summer school after that, so I'm going to kind of have this block of time. So I'm still working on that, making some specific aims, and then also like separately, there's still stuff in the DevoNN group, which is not for this lab meeting, but I still want to have some things going on over there. But for the time being, there was, I can't find my notes on what I was going to say, but I'm very interested in kind of, Anson and I have very similar interests, as obviously, so I'm happy to see where he goes, and like I would completely revisit like the free energy principle, revisit like Eric Cole's or look more at Qualia research, because I'm not quite sure Qualia, I haven't looked at it enough to really know how I feel about Qualia and what they're doing with it, but obviously I'm interested, so I'm sure there are things there that can happen. But as for me, as far as myself personally, that's just, I feel like I'm kind of saying the same thing every last couple of weeks, but it's sort of this, I'm in this incremental development phase of things, so yeah.
Well, that's good. Yeah.
I'm sure.
Oh, go ahead.
Oh, I was just saying, I'm sure Justin and I will collaborate somewhat too, and that we talk like every day anyways. And then, for later, Justin, do you want to like set up like a boot camp schedule of pre-neuromath things to learn?
Yeah, they actually have some of that. That can be something that honestly we could for this. I mean, I don't know if you know, but Bradly's going to be a mentor for this.
Yeah.
So I mean, we can pretty much have that can be part of the lab.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be official. Also, I'm going to lab stuff, but like we can have a discussion area for that. I'm sure.
Yeah.
My linear algebra right now is pretty strong. I just finished the course, so if you want some help there, I could probably help out. I gotta learn Python real quick. But yeah, that'll be interesting. I think I have the energy. I've been doing physical therapy, so my health has been.
Yeah, you've been a lot better this week. Just like outside to comment Bradly, like Anson's not been very well for a while, but he's like, it's really great. Like this is like you've probably seen him like for 4 or 5 meetings now, and he's been like different levels. This is like actual happy, engaged Anson, so it's great to see.
Yeah. Rather than doped out, I'm in pain and nauseous. Yeah. I was having like daily migraines for a long time, and issues with fatigue and medication side effects from the migraine treatment. So like I was definitely not in like I was like in survival. Okay, like how am I going to navigate the medical system because insurance is not easy to get details with, and there's this weird when it comes to like chronic pain, there's this weird attitude of like it's in your mind, and like some doctors, I've been lucky enough that none of the doctors I've had, maybe one nurse, and none of the doctors I had that attitude, but my parents kind of do, and I had to deal with that too. But I processed a lot of it, and at this point, I'm really, really, really grateful that things seem to be getting better, and I seem to be getting back to like the normal with new tools that will hopefully by the end of summer get me back into a place where like I am able to really tackle my research, grad school, and getting far, far away from my little hillbilly city.
And I'm sure we're all on board for that. Did you? I know we don't have that much time left. Did you want to go over the abstract or what?
Yeah.
I don't know what we should really do.
We might spend about 10 minutes. Go about 10 minutes over. Is that okay?
I'm fine.
Yeah.
I don't mind going.
Yeah. So yeah, So for Jesse, if you want to share some thoughts on the paper you were talking about, we can do it on Slack. And, I'm going to present a couple things. I was I'm gonna touch on. I never know what we want to do in the meetings. I kind of keep it freeform because I think it's important for people to hash things out in the meeting. And okay, can you see my screen?
Oh, sorry.
There we go. Okay, so
I can see it, right?
yeah. So we were talking about this abstract last week in very abstract terms. So we're going to submit it this Saturday. So what I've done is actually I sent it to the the administrators at the workshop, but we'll probably have a chance to update it a little bit. So in the last week, I've been working on putting this together. So these are the authors here. We have all the people from our other paper that we did on this similar thing. So Ankit wanted to be on it, and we talked about this stuff a little bit. So and I think it came out pretty well. The title is Developmental Embodied Agents as Metabrain Models. So we go through the abstract here. We present a framework for metabrain models or hybrid models that capture multiple aspects of developmental neurobiology and behavior. We go through the introduction, and so basically this is the developmental Bratenberg vehicles, and then we talk about what those are as embodied models. And this is just synthesizing a lot of the stuff that we talked about in the meetings and talked about in the paper, so it kind of rehashes that, but it puts it in the cast for a different audience. Oh yeah, there are probably some typos. I'll check it. Thank you. So I think this was Z, who's I don't know if he probably put a comment in. And then so this goes through sort of morphological differentiation as growth and as layering. So the idea is we kind of talk about how the developmental Bratenberg vehicle is this process, sort of captures this process of morphological differentiation in two ways. And so we go through that. This is actually the part that Z and Stefan were sort of contributed to. I just took from their parts of the paper and put it in here. So we talk about the Hebbian learning approach and the genetic algorithm approach. And then we get into layering. So this involves the CGS model as well. So this is a diagram of how we have the vehicles and then the CGS model on top of that. And so it's a layered model. In this case, we're just showing that there's a kernel, embedded in the network. But the second figure actually shows us more sort of conceptual view that, where you have the representation-free model and the representational-rich model, and that they communicate back and forth. And so the CGS is this representation-rich model, and then the Bratenberg vehicle is the representation-free model. I make that distinction in here. And so so the introduction talks about the developmental Bratenberg vehicle, and then finally in the layering section we get into the CGS and how it's a layer on top of that. And then it talks about how to develop context, which involves the CGS kernel more explicitly, and how that creates context from the inputs from the Bratenberg vehicle. So the way it works is you have something in the environment that gets sensed, and the Bratenberg vehicle processes it, and then the CGS kernel classifies it in some way, more sort of in a more nuanced fashion than the CGS would, or than the Bratenberg vehicle would process it. So I think I talk in here about light sources, different colored light sources, and I also talk about like distinctions between different signals in space, putting some sort of content, putting those in a contextual framework. And so, I mean, we only have 4 pages on this. Actually, this was in the A-Life template. It was 4 pages, almost exactly. This abstract in this format was like 9.5 pages. So it's not a short paper, but it's like I think it covers a lot of ground for that size limitation, that length limitation. But I think it's, I think it goes through pretty well. I had to be vague about some things because I didn't have enough space, but dynamic components. Oh, this is the part where talk about architectural features. So the second part is going through the architectural features that we have: innate components, dynamical components or dynamic components, and bio-inspired components. And so it kind of walks through each aspect of that part of the architecture. So in this part,
are the innate components similar to what they were talking about, what the Qualia Research Institute was talking about, like the innate formalisms, or is it different?
Well,
I haven't read the paper
yet,
so I'm definitely going to go over that as we continue later.
So let's see. The innate components are, so people have talked about this because the way that people have talked about this, people have dealt with like neural networks generally, is that there's no innateness to it. It's just kind of like you have a network, it's nondescript, it processes data, you dump it, there you go. There's been some debate about whether to add innate features like genomic information or like some sort of thing where it's born with some symbolic information in it. And so what we're doing is we're kind of like we have like a Breitenberg vehicle, and if you read the Breitenberg vehicles book, they talk about these behaviors that it exhibits. And the reason that they exhibit the behaviors is because you basically have a hardwired network. And the developmental version of this is where we take those internal connections and we vary them over development, which, it maybe helps in terms of plasticity, but it also degrades those behaviors that are hardwired into the vehicle. So we have a second layer, which is context, which is also innate in terms of the categories that you give it, but it's also supervises that developmental process so that it gives it some like basis. There's some innateness there, I guess, as well. And this just kind of discusses some of the issues with like connectionist architectures and the way we measure vehicle movement, things like that. So there's some issues of innateness, and when they talk about innateness in like consciousness research, they're definitely talking about like, well, that whole idea, that whole basic argument of blank slate versus being born with innate knowledge. Like, right, if I look at classifications of things in our world, like a cup or a computer, am I born with that concept or am I not? Do I have to learn it? And so oh yeah. So I mean, it's basically about representation. So like, if I have am I born with a representation of a cup, or do I learn it? And so, one of the things that you could look at, of course, is you could look at like babies and how they sort of deal with concepts, and we find that they kind of gradually acquire them. You could also look at cross-culturally where they have different, concepts of a cup and see how they deal with those things. So, I mean, there are a lot of ways, but in like simulation, it's a little bit more difficult because, you actually have machines where you can like identify cups, but you don't have to necessarily have that concept. But you also have problems with misclassification.
So, like, I was listening to the to an interview with Anthony Camaro.
Yeah.
Camaro, we talked about how, from a radical body cognition perspective, there's this idea of affordances, in that, like, when a cat sees a couch, they don't see this is a couch. They see I can sit on this. The idea that your environment and your recognition of it is based off your innate skills. Like, it'd be really hard to learn to walk if your legs didn't already know how to walk. It's built in such a way that it is, and you have instincts related to walking and grasping. So what would the other, like, I guess, camp be that contrasts that kind of like radical embodied? I don't know. I guess that's not an entirely
Well, didn't this come up in the reading group that affordances are basically a way to get around representations? Like it's sort of like a subset of, you don't have to model. Instead of creating all these models, you create a model of the whole world and update it accordingly as necessary. Like, is that?
Oh, so like that makes sense.
And like this. See, I think what definitely one thing that you and I should do in the context of, which directly ties to the paper as it is, and everything else. Like, we talked about affordances last time too, and I think it'd be great to do a presentation. We can both do it, whatever, on just the concept of affordances, and not just affordances, but how they fit that question, and how they fit essentially what Bradley's talking about here. Like, Bradley's in the paper. In the universe of our developmental brain vehicle stuff, it's kind of, there's this set of things we're dealing with, but I think affordance is sort of, it'd be a very interesting way to juxtapose a lot of the things that we've done in terms of the innateness question, and that's a huge question too. Like that's like even like the crux of like the AI debate from last year with Yasha Bendio and Gary Marcus was, okay, we agree there's got to be some innateness, but how much and what does it look like? Like that's like the center of contemporary, artificial intelligence is what is innateness, and how much of it, what is a hybrid model that affords it quotes, but that's like. Everybody's wondering that, and so
we don't talk much about affordances here, and maybe we should have, but I mean, so we also have to present. If I think it's going to be accepted, if it's accepted, we have to give a presentation at A-Life at this workshop. So then the thing is, we have to present on this, and the way I like to approach presentations is, we might want to go a little bit beyond the paper, like. What is, like, because you can read the paper and it's, just recapping the paper is useless. Can we go beyond? And I think there we can maybe talk about affordances and some of the deeper concepts here.
Yeah, I think I've actually, is there any chance to make, so I looked at the abstract, and I actually really like it. I think it's really cool, and it's a really great summary of everything. So, thank you for putting it together. I kind of want to go over. Is it like totally submitted? Like, I might do a little tweaking, but it's not.
I sent it to them by we'll probably have to do like a camera ready version where we update some of this stuff. Probably some mistakes, but that'll be later, and then we can update. We have a separate version that I can post to ResearchGate for people to read. That because the A-Life format is, I don't know if you've seen the 2-column format.
Yeah,
I
like that. Yeah.
Well, I mean, I think we'll have a version on ResearchGate, this one version. I think because the figures are bigger and people can see more. So I mean, and maybe we can even add something about affordances in this. Maybe expand it a little bit out because it's there was that page limitation here. But we do have to do the presentation as well, so that's
absolutely, and I'm happy to contribute to the presentation, however it works best.
And then I think if you really want to get a good sense of I really like the resource or the references that I was able to come up with here. I think it covers a lot of ground. We have philosophy of science. We have neurosimulation, simulation neuroscience, even by name. We have some modeling stuff. We have some neuroscience in here. Yeah, and then some good old cognitive science. So yeah, it's a nice.
I saw something about ecology there. What was it about in the bibliography?
Oh, ecology. This
Maybe
one.
I just like imagining it.
This is a paper on something called heterochrony. So this is something I mentioned about like heterochrony is basically about developmental timing. So the idea of development is that you have this phenotype that unfolds from a single cell, and of course development is also like behaviors emerging as well. So there's a lot of different aspects of development, but what heterochrony deals with is like the timing of things. So in some organisms, let's say you have two related organisms, two species. And in one species, the developmental trajectory is where your body grows at a certain rate, in terms of length. And in the sister species, it grows more slowly. So it's shorter and smaller. But the reason it's shorter and smaller is because in development, it grew more slowly. And so then it hits that developmental end of the developmental window, and then it stops growing and it's smaller as a result. So people think that they're genes that control like growth, and so that's how you get that sort of difference in growth trajectory. I mean, you could probably apply it to like the critical period of learning as well. So like in development, you have a critical period where you acquire things, basic concepts, or sometimes it's brain development that occur in a window where things are highly plastic. Mm-hmm. And so if you change that rate of growth, or that rate of growth, basically, you can, induce, bigger brains, or you can induce more plasticity in learning. I think that's a really underexplored concept in a lot of like AI and in simulation is heterochrony. I've been working on a little bit of stuff in the other group on that.
So if you change the rate, it changes what? Sorry, my brother just turned on the laundry dryer, so I got distracted for like a second.
Oh yeah. So basically, there's a rate of growth over developmental time. So
I followed that. Yeah. So you said if you change the rate of growth, you change what?
Yeah. Well, if you change the rate of growth, you change like the outcome. So like if you slow down growth over development, you end up maybe with a smaller phenotype. If you increase the rate of growth, you end up with a larger phenotype. And then this maps to different traits. It could also map to like learning, a period of learning where you had a certain amount of time to like learn some things, some very basic concepts. If you had a growth rate that was really high, you could learn a lot more. But there's probably some trade-off in terms of something else in the organism. I mean, this is pretty vague, I guess, but I think I probably would present on this a little bit more for people to give an idea of how we could apply it to what we're talking about here in the group. But I think it's an important concept that maybe we should revisit.
What is it called again? Heterochrony?
Heterochrony. Yeah, so it's change over time. Chrony being time. Hetero being like diversity or change.
I just want to say two really quick things, because I don't want to keep us longer than we need to be. But one, I've recently heard some stuff about plasticity that really fits with that, neuroplasticity in general. Because, like the very high, I think the critical period would be like just, okay, absorb information, and then after that, there's this period of, it's much easier to, you're like whittling away, and then you can potentially develop new stuff. And secondly, I wish I knew this term a little bit more when I was in my neuroscience lab, because we were looking at the development of circadian rhythm in like young mice, and I don't quite know if it really fits with what heterochrony is, as I said here, but like in a very basic sense, we're looking at how different, essentially, behavioral patterns come online as the mice is born into the world, day 1, day 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10, and how there are certain regulatory patterns that just cannot function because the brain isn't developed enough yet to even manage it. And so we're going to look at how circadian rhythm either is or isn't influenced by that development. So sticking a point in that to refer to later about talks. But yeah.
I think there's a lot of like in more general developmental timing principles that are probably relevant to some of the stuff like with there's so much I think potential in that kind of model where you have an embodied model that undergoes development and it's sort of biologically inspired, and then you have a layer where it's there's context involved, and so you kind of like piece together like something that's really maybe intelligent but also very grounded in biological change. I think it's a really there's a lot of potential there.
Yeah, it's like innate. What are innate structures as well? I think. Is heterochrony like specifically a comparison between like two hetero as in like not uniform, like comparison oriented, or is it just?
Yeah, so I mean, if you have to compare different or usually it's developed comparing two different species
Like
in their growth. Yeah, so I showed last week in DevoNN, I showed that thing about Darcy Thompson in the on Growth and Form.
Yeah.
These graphs where you can compare different fish morphologies and how the landmarks relate to one another.
Mm-hmm,
That's sort of similar to this idea. Like the idea would be that those landmarks are different in part because their growth, the period of growth is accelerated or decelerated over developmental time. So if you have accelerated growth over developmental time, you get a larger distance between the landmarks. If it's decelerated, you get a shorter distance. Sometimes with fishes, actually, there's been a lot of work on heterochrony in fishes where, they look at snout length. Snout length is highly variable in development, and it has to do with their ecology, but also with their just this principle of heterochrony where growth is controlled in development. So you get shorter variance and longer variance, and that's part of the natural variation is just speeding up or slowing down things in development.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And yeah,
Hearing you guys talk about this made me realize my research interests are actually pretty synergetic with Brainbird Vehicle in that the missing piece is having the sensory input and output.
yeah.
Whereas I guess it'd be a little strange to think about inputting allostatic particular ecological roles inside the Brainbird Vehicle. I think my first thought is we're gonna make a dog. I do think there are interesting places that I could go with that in terms of giving a simplistic creature the basis of my research interest is basically kinds of allostatic processes and relations, and the kinds of the dichotomies that one can exist in within the ecology, and I think applying that to ultimately a created. I'm not sure how to. Adaptive system that actually is physically grounded would be an easy way to visualize that. I think also what philology makes me think of is a lot of the affordance research is about mice and how the size of their limbs changes what around them is in affordance. And I think there's interesting ties to that and the idea that we actually have that different agents actually exist in different ecological niches, and especially because you have what is it called, convergent evolution, like dolphins and sharks evolving similar anatomy because of similar process, similar roles that they. I mean, dolphins aren't similar roles, but similar
niches. Yeah,
affordances that they must operate on that were helpful for the role that they ended up playing in the ecology.
Right.
Is there more we needed to talk about with the abstract?
No, I think we're done with that. So that's so. I just wanted everyone to get a sense of what was done here, and that we've submitted a version of it, and we'll probably be able to make small changes to it later, and then we'll get back to that when we get more information.
Yeah, I really.
Please link to me.
Yeah, I really like it. I feel like I probably could have contributed it to it more, so I apologize for that. But I'm happy to help.
Yeah.
With it.
Yeah, like I said, we'll have to do a presentation on it. So, and so yeah, that's pretty much it. It's some papers, but we'll do that next week. I've just been kind of collecting things, and we get to them when we get to them. And I think there's I didn't get to do any work on the CGS this week because I was working on that. So that's for subsequent weeks. So next week, yeah, we'll just Anson, if you want to write up some of your notes, and maybe we can talk about the other thing that you were going to do in terms. Well, I think maybe a research vision is a good way to approach this. Is where you kind of say what you want to do and how you might do it, and just keep updating it as we talk. That way, you have a good, I think, roadmap for like this is how I'm going to do it, and I can like refine it as we go along. Don't worry about it being too perfect. Just put your ideas down and say, this is basically what I want to do.
I think I already have the main mechanisms and the model and paradigms. I just definitely sketch it out and make some outlines. I think the thing that I really am missing, will be advanced mathematical models that have nuance. But in terms of detailing, okay, you have scales, you have an ecology, you have particular stances within that are determined by allostatic internal external relations or forms and stances and prioritization and kinds of prioritizations. I think that's pretty straightforward. I just need to sit down for an hour and sketch stuff out.
Yeah, I think I one of the things that since coming to the lab, I sketch it out, and then also I really encourage create a very concise PowerPoint presentation and present it. That's actually that's what Bradly's encouraged me to do a lot, and it's a very good way to do it, not just for yourself, but communicating it so that people understand it, and it really boils things down. So it might even be very good, which majority of my presentations have not been, especially on things like the free energy principle, whatever else. But they are things you can continue to refine.
Yeah,
I really encourage that.
I have issues involving summarization and breaking things down from literal, factual, discrete pieces. So I think that'd be good for me in that, I get lost in the trees a lot. And even though I see the forest, I have a hard time articulating in a way that's accessible unless someone has the same background as me. So I think definitely a good practice.
It's its own skill set. It's an art form, for sure.
Yeah, you have to practice.
Yeah. I'm really excited to dive into research. I think I'm in a good spot. Because I can't believe I somehow end up in 3 online meeting spaces that are exactly what my research interests. 4 for the most, I guess. and I think I think it'd be interesting if I could if you link me the paper about you guys have shared, I might be able to contextualize my research interest in context of what the lab has been doing, and I could easily see I don't know, I think I actually do kind of like the idea of inputting default ecological preferences into a Bratenberg vehicle being interesting. Ethically weird, but interesting. I don't know if it's how plausible it actually be, but if it is plausible, it'd be fascinating.
Yeah, well, we'll see. I'll send you a link to the paper too, which is the first paper that we wrote.
Yeah.
So
I think earlier I think I am kind of in that gap between the discourse between ecological and body cognition and the formalist. I'm making I'm formalizing ecology and embodiment. I'm saying there are innate internal dynamics within an embodied existence within an ecology So I think I'm not sure how to label that yet, but because it does seem to be like straight in between the two. It's very like purely it very much is rooted in ecological embodiment, but it is also extremely formalist.
Yeah, I think that's sort of like, the space of a lot of action. And I think a lot of Chimera's work has just been, okay, here's as much as possible what embodiment and radical embodiment can do. And a lot of that, like, that's kind of, and I think to relate it to the lab stuff specifically, brain group vehicles they're not representational, they're representation free. And a lot of the work has been, all right, building off of this sort of a representational model, where do we go from there? That's why I've kind of addressed it as like a spectrum of representation, or a spectrum. You could even do it and think about it and actually frame it in terms of like not just a spectrum of representation, but a spectrum of what innateness and how much innateness and what does that innateness have, or what changes that, or even like genetically over time, how does the innateness evolve, whatever. So.
Is this ecological role layer I'm making representational? In that, like, it is like a lot of the arguments Camaro makes is that your relationship with the environment can be directly modeled such that you don't need a representation of the environment because you are embodied and interact directly with it. And that is kind of the basis of my model, is that you are embodied in ecology such that as emerging from that ecology, you have particular kinds of relationships, not all of which are physical. So I guess if it's not physical, it would be representational, but at the same time, it is about like directly relating to your ecology and environment and the forms that ecology has.
I think we should definitely continue this discussion in Slack, either in a specific channel or like that's an actual research question itself. There's a channel for that too, but somewhere in Slack, find a place and we'll continue that.
Yeah.
If there's anything else for today,
no,
because I have to go soon myself.
All right, guys. Thanks for meeting.
I'm about to go for a walk and listen to the second half of the podcast that was interviewing the Qualia Research Institute. While I walk around in nature. It's a really beautiful day.
Yeah. Okay, guys. Have a good week. Talk to you.
This is really fun. See you next week. I'll try to get in touch.
Okay. Yeah. Talk to you later. Bye.
Take care. Bye-bye.